Vice President Mike Pompeo and National Security Advisor O'Brien came out here to carry out the President's directive to get a ceasefire as soon as possible in those areas where the Turks had penetrated into northeast Syria. And in return, we would work with them to see what we could do about the sanctions, not putting new sanctions on, and eventually, if things went in the right direction, lifting the sanctions that we have already put on at the beginning of the week. We had extensive negotiations with President Erdogan directly and with his staff. We have a very convoluted situation now with Russian, Syrian Army, Turkish, American, SDF, and some Daesh elements all floating around in a very wild way. And we're most concerned about getting our troops out of the way, which is what DOD is doing at this point. Essentially, we have this pause in the Turkish operations for 5 days as the SDF withdraws from those areas where the Turks are. At the end of that 5 days, if the SDF has withdrawn, the Turks will cease all operations in northeast Syria. The Turks have their own discussions going on with the Russians and with the Syrians in other areas of the northeast and in Manbij to the west of the Euphrates. Whether they incorporate that later into a Turkish-controlled safe zone, it was not discussed in any detail. That right now is not Turkish-controlled territory. It's controlled by the Russians, or it's controlled by a mix of Russians and Syrians, or by Syrians. There's no doubt that the YPG wishes that they could stay in these areas. It is our assessment that they had no military ability to hold on to these areas, and therefore we thought that a ceasefire would be much better for the eventual, aside from saving lives, which was very important for President Trump and Vice President Pence. We also thought it would be much better for trying to get some kind of control over this chaotic situation. The Turkish army has seized a great deal of territory in a very short period of time. We had no doubt whatsoever that they would not continue seizing territory if we couldn't get a ceasefire. Against our very strong advice once again, and we think tragically, President Erdogan decided to go in militarily. This was a huge mistake. We condemned it at the time, and what we're trying to do now is to fix it. But the situation on the ground is the Turks are there, and you've got all kinds of other forces that have now, as a result of this attack, gone in. The point is, we have agreed with them that only if they adhere to the terms of this, in terms of a pause and then a halt, will we act on these sanctions. First, not to have new sanctions beginning as soon as the pause goes into effect, and then after 5 days, if they do halt permanently, no more military action in the northeast other than self-defense, then we will lift those sanctions that were imposed this Monday. The Turks have reassured us many times that they have no intention whatsoever, from President Erdogan personally on down today, of staying in Syria very long. Black cloud is pretty complicated. The secretary is